Our next set of notes is going to be on writing equations from a word problem, so a real world situation. We did something very much like this when we were working with expressions. With expressions, we did the same thing. We identified the variable, and then we wrote the expression. This time we'll be identifying the variable, telling what it stands for, which is defining the variable, and then writing our equation, and then finally we're going to solve our equation. Let's look at our very first problem here. So it says Emma paid $26 in all for a hammer and a screwdriver. The hammer cost $10. Write an addition equation using the variable n to show how much she spent on the screwdriver. So a couple of things here. First of all, it tells us that we should use n. The word problem tells us to use n, and it tells us what n is. N is how much she spent on the screwdriver. It tells us how much she paid in all, and when we see that word, those words in all, we're going to think that's what our problem is going to be equal to. That's the end of our problem. And we see that she bought a hammer and a screwdriver, and we see that the hammer cost $10. All right, so first of all, what does our variable stand for? The problem tells us that our variable stands for how much she spent on the screwdriver. So next we need to take that and we need to write an equation with it. Well, we know that this is the amount she spent on the screwdriver, and if we add that to the amount that she spent on the hammer, altogether she paid $26. So we're going to take the amount she spent on the hammer, we're going to add the n, the amount that she spent on the screwdriver that we don't know, and then we know that that equals $26. Now we have an equation that we can solve. And so we're going to take our 10 plus n equals 26. We're going to do our opposite operations, subtracting 10 from both sides so that we can isolate that variable. We're going to pull down our n, and we're going to see that 26 minus 10 is 16. And then we're going to label that dollars, and we know now that Emma paid $16 for the screwdriver and $10 for the hammer for a total cost of $26. All right, so we're going to skip over number 2 for right now and move on to number 3. Number 3 says, a box of pencils costs $3, so we know that's going to be important. Brian got $2 change, so he gets $2 back after paying for one box. Write a subtraction equation using the variable x to show how much Brian gave the cashier. So first we have to define our variable. It's x, and that means that it stands for how much Brian gave the cashier. Then we need to write our equation. Well, Brian gave the cashier x dollars. He paid $3 for the box, and he got $2 back. So here's the amount he gave the cashier. Here's the amount that she kept because he was paying for the box, and here's what he got back. So the total amount Brian paid minus, the total amount Brian gave the cashier minus the $3 he paid left him $2. And so to solve our equation, x minus 3 equals 2, we add 3 to both sides because that's the opposite of what's happening to x here. And we bring down our x, and then 2 plus 3 is 5. So Brian started off with $5. All right, we're going to skip the one about the degrees Fahrenheit here and move on down to Cheryl. So our problem says that Cheryl gets paid $8 per hour. Whenever you see that per, something that's happening per hour or per mile, that's going to signal a multiplication problem to you. So the word per should make you think multiplication. So Cheryl gets paid $8 per hour at her job at the record store. She made a total of $96. When we see the word total, we can think about it's going to equal $96. So that should be our equal part. Last week, write and solve an equation to show how many hours she worked last week. Well, they don't tell us what variable to use, so I chose h for hours. H is the number of hours that Cheryl worked, and I got that right out of the problem. And we know that we're going to take the number of hours she worked, which we don't know, that's our variable, and we'll multiply that times h, and we know that she got a total then of $96 for the week. So 8 times the number of hours she worked gave us the total of $96 that she made. Now we're going to take our equation and solve it. Because we're multiplying 8 times the variable h, we're going to divide both sides by 8. We're left with h to bring down, and then 96 divided by 8 gives us 12. So she worked 12 hours last week. Want to back up here for just a second because our directions did say to be sure to label each of our answers. And so over here we want to make sure that this is $5 that I think it was Brian gave our cashier. And then down here Cheryl worked 12 hours. So we want to make sure those labels are on there. All right, let's look at our last one here. All of the students in Tim's class are divided. Well, that's a big clue right there, right? We know that it's going to be a division problem. Into 4 teams. So divided what? Divided by 4. Divided by 4. And that equals 6 students in each one of our teams. So we've got some number of students that we're going to divide into 4 teams, and we'll have 6 students in each team. So write and solve an equation using the variable s to show the total number of students in Tim's class. Well, it tells us right in the problem that s is the total number of students in Tim's class, and we're going to take that total s, we're going to divide it into 4 teams, and each team then will end up with 6 students in it. And so now we have an equation that we can solve. So we take our s divided by 4 equals 6. The opposite of dividing by 4 is multiplying by 4, so we do that on both sides of our equal sign. That divided by 4 takes care of that, and then we bring down our s, and then 6 times 4 is 24. So there were 24 students altogether in Tim's class. All right, guys, going to move on to your SWIC now.